Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a reclusive engineer inherits a house free from HOA control, he thinks he's found peace. But when a ruthless HOA president tries to illegally claim his property, he fights back. With cameras, lawyers, and sheer grit, what begins as quiet turns into all-out suburban warfare. I've always liked quiet, not the kind of forced quiet that comes with isolation or social awkwardness, but the kind you earn, the kind that comes from knowing you've built a life that fits you just right. After my dad passed 3 years ago, I inherited his old house just outside Phoenix, a dusty ranch-style home with a big wraparound porch, a lawn that refused to die even in the Arizona sun, and a privacy fence tall enough to block out both nosy neighbors and political door knockers. I kept to myself, worked from home as an electronics engineer, and only left the property when I had to. In other words, I was the perfect target. I hadn't even noticed the change at first. The neighborhood, once full of retired veterans and middle-aged couples just trying to get by, had slowly started to shift. The HOA, Hillcrest Rancho, an annoyingly pretentious name for a collection of prefab homes with identical driveways, had recently elected a new president, Karen Hale. I'd only seen her once before, walking down the street in pastel slacks and a polo shirt tucked in tighter than her smile. She had the kind of eyes that scanned your property like a drone on surveillance. I figured she was just another local zealot on a personal crusade against tall grass or wind chimes. I didn't think she'd ever come for me. Then the letter came. I found it in the mailbox one Wednesday morning, sandwiched between a water bill and some real estate spam. The envelope was crisp white, no stamp, hand-delivered. The logo in the corner read Hillcrest Rancho Homeowners Association, building community one standard at a time. I remember smirking at that. I wasn't part of any HOA. My dad made sure of that when he bought the house in the 90s. The lot was older than the development around it, grandfathered out of the association by legal documentation that was as ironclad as the safe he used to keep it in. Still, I opened it, more curious than concerned. Dear resident, our records indicate your property has not yet been formally enrolled in the Hillcrest Rancho Community Initiative. As per new district zoning guidelines and updated architectural standards, all residential homes within the Hillcrest Ranch boundary are required to submit a residential membership registration form, pay the annual community assessment $900, review and adhere to the updated General Development Plan (GDP). Please complete the above actions within 30 calendar days to ensure your continued enjoyment of shared community benefits. Sincerely, Karen Hale, President Hillcrest Rancho HOA. I laughed, literally out loud. The idea that some clipboard tyrant thought she could just sweep in and absorb my home like it was a grocery store loyalty card was laughable. I tossed the letter on the kitchen counter and went back to work. No calls, no response. I figured that would be the end of it. A week later, a second letter came. Same format, this time printed on yellow paper like a parking citation. It had the same list of demands, but now with bold red text at the bottom. Failure to comply may result in corrective actions or loss of certain property privileges. That phrase stuck with me. Property privileges. As if my ownership was a lease and she was the landlord. Still, I ignored it. The house was mine. The land was mine. It wasn't even up for debate. The first sign that this was more than harmless HOA noise came when I noticed a small white flag planted on the corner of my lawn. It had a plastic marker tag and the initials HRGDP. I pulled it out, shrugged, and chucked it in the trash. 2 days later, another appeared, this time closer to the porch. Then came the knocks. Not Karen herself, of course. She didn't do her own dirty work. It was one of her lackeys, some kid barely out of college with a clipboard and a forced smile, asking if I had a moment to discuss integration with the community plan. I told him to take his clipboard, his khakis, and his initiative and walk them right off my property. He left without a word. It escalated fast after that. I came home from a weekend trip to find a cheap orange notice zip-tied to my fence post. Non-compliant structure, pending review. It had a fake-looking seal on it and a date scrawled in red ink. There was no official agency named, no city emblem. Just HRHOA Compliance Division. It would have been funny if it wasn't so creepy. Someone had trespassed while I was gone. That night, I installed a second camera above my garage. The next morning, I found tire marks on the edge of my gravel driveway, like someone had pulled up close, maybe to drop something off, maybe to take photos. I didn't sleep much that week. Every quiet moment felt like it was being watched. Every rustle outside at night, every knock that didn't come, twisted the silence I used to enjoy into something more hostile. And through it all, I hadn't even spoken to Karen Hale, but I knew her hand was behind it. And she was just getting started. I thought maybe the orange notice would be the end of it. One last desperate grab for control before Karen realized I wasn't some clueless transplant she could scare into submission, but I'd underestimated her. Grossly. Exactly 8 days after that fake compliance tag showed up on my fence, I got another letter. This one was thicker, certified, signed for. It was delivered by some teenager in a security polo who looked like he spent more time vaping than enforcing anything. I didn't bother exchanging pleasantries, just grabbed the envelope and shut the door. Inside were 5 pages of printed legalese and a signature that, to my utter lack of surprise, belonged to Karen Hale. The opening line was pure Orwellian theater. Due to your ongoing failure to register your property in accordance with the revised community charter, Hillcrest Rancho HOA has voted to initiate proceedings for non-voluntary assimilation under the Unified Standards Clause. That sounded made up, and it was. There is no such clause, no law, no authority, just Karen playing HOA dictator with a word template and a self-inflated sense of power, but she wasn't bluffing. The letter continued. If the owner does not take action within 10 business days to submit architectural compliance documentation and HOA enrollment payment, the association reserves the right to pursue escalation via municipal channels and initiate property reassignment proceedings. I had to reread that twice. Property reassignment, as in they were going to try to take my house. I scanned the rest of the pages. It was a mix of vague threats, cherry-picked zoning terms, and a list of non-compliances that included things like fence height exceeding community standard, non-neutral exterior paint tones, and absence of acceptable landscaping. Never mind that my fence was legal per county code, my house was beige, and my front yard was desert rock and cactus because I live in the damn desert. That was when I decided to lawyer up. I called James, the same real estate attorney who helped me with the title transfer after my dad passed. He's in his 60s, cranky, and allergic to bullshit. I scanned the letter to him, and 5 minutes later, he called me laughing. Tell your little neighborhood tyrant that her HOA has zero jurisdiction over you. Your parcel was explicitly excluded from their founding charter. I'll draft a response and slap it with notarized documentation of your exemption. If she pushes again, we can file a restraining order for harassment. I told him to go for it. 3 days later, Karen received a nice, polite letter from James with a copy of the property deed, the exclusion clause from the original development plan, and a page that simply read, in bold capital letters, "This property is not subject to HO. Oversight. Any further action may constitute harassment or fraud." I figured that would shut her down. End of story. I was wrong. A week later, I woke up to find a black trash bag torn open across my front walkway. Banana peels, fast food wrappers, even a used diaper. The smell hit before the visual did. It wasn't just trash, it was deliberate, planted, smeared. My security cam didn't catch it. The bastard had come from the blind spot near the side fence. I filed a police report anyway. Vandalism. Officer took it seriously to his credit, but told me unless I had footage or a witness, it'd be hard to follow up. The next incident came 2 nights later. A bright orange sticker had been slapped on my front window, like one of those public health condemnations. In all caps, it said, "Unapproved modifications, HOA action pending." I peeled it off slowly, my blood pressure rising with every centimeter. Again, no name, no real agency title, just the same fake compliance division watermark that matched the zip-tied tag from before. It was psychological warfare at this point, and Karen was escalating. Every other day brought something new. A noise complaint that prompted a cop to show up on a Saturday afternoon while I was literally reading on my porch. Another day, a city inspector knocked on the door asking about a reported illegal carport extension. I didn't even have a carport. Turns out someone had been making anonymous complaints to the City Code Bureau. I invited the inspector inside, showed him around. No violations. He apologized and left, but not before letting something slip. "You're not the only one. I've had to check 4 other houses this month in Hillcrest, all older properties, all not actually part of the HOA, same complaints." I asked him if Karen Hale's name had come up. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. I went back inside and poured myself a drink. Then I printed a sign and zip-tied it to my fence. Private property. This parcel is not part of Hillcrest HOA. Trespassing will be recorded and prosecuted. I installed another camera, this time covering the side yard. Karen wanted a war. Fine. Let's see how she liked fighting someone who reads circuit schematics for fun. The third time the cops came to my house, I didn't even get annoyed. I just sighed, closed my laptop, and went to the door with my driver's license already in hand. Officer Chang was standing on my porch looking vaguely apologetic, like a waiter who had to bring bad soup to the table twice. "Mr. Carter," he said, adjusting his sunglasses. "We received another complaint. Disturbance of peace. Possible illegal structure. Something about engine noise." I raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Anonymous tip?" He smirked. "Yep, same voice as last time, far as dispatch can tell. Female, mid-40s, real confident. I didn't need a psychic to tell me it was Karen. I was using a cordless drill," I said, motioning toward the open garage, installing a set of shelves. "At 2 in the afternoon. Chang looked past me into the garage. "Yeah, I figured. Just need to log it. You know how it goes." I nodded and waved him in to take a quick look. The shelves weren't even up yet. Just pieces of pine leaning against the workbench. He noted it, thanked me, and left. As he walked back to his cruiser, he muttered something like, "Someone's got way too much time on their hands." I knew Karen wasn't trying to get me fined. Not really. This was about paper cuts. 1,000 little ones meant to wear me down, make me either cave in or slip up. The problem was, I didn't wear down. I compartmentalized. I'd been building circuit boards since I was 12. I could outlast her petty campaign on pure boredom tolerance. But Karen was learning too. 2 mornings later, I walked out to grab my trash bins and found the lid missing off one. Inside was a soggy HOA violation notice, soaked through and jammed under an empty box of soda cans. It wasn't even addressed to me. The name was for some house 4 streets over, but Karen had written in Sharpie over the top, "This is what neglect looks like." Subtle. Then came the paint. Late one night, around 1:30, I was sitting in my office soldering a power connector when my motion sensor went off. The camera pinged to my phone. A blurry figure in a hoodie had ducked past my fence and was creeping along the side yard. I bolted up, grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the door, and flicked on the floodlights. By the time I got outside, the figure was gone. But the damage wasn't. Spray painted across my shed, in foot-high white letters, were the words, "Community Menace." That was it. I called the cops. Again. This time, I showed them the footage. Not great. Face hidden, hoodie up. But clear enough to prove someone had trespassed. Officer Chang came again, and this time he didn't smile. "You want to file a full report?" he asked. I nodded. "And I want to press charges the moment you ID them." He handed me a form, and I filled it out. I also emailed it to my lawyer, James, who called me 15 minutes later with the tone of a man chewing nails. "She crossed the line," he said. "Vandalism, trespassing, harassment. We're not just responding anymore. We're documenting everything. Start a log, dates, times, screenshots, audio. If she tries to push this into court or involve city officials again, we'll be ready." I started that log the same night, printed stills from the security footage, screenshot the timestamps, made a spreadsheet with every incident. Trash, fake letters, unauthorized signs, the paint. I even noted the HOA letters that weren't addressed to me, the ones that mysteriously ended up in my yard or taped to my gate. Then I hit back. I wrote a formal cease and desist letter to Karen Hale, CC'd to the Hillcrest Rancho HOA board, and filed through James's office. It cited specific state statutes on private property rights, intentional harassment, and misuse of municipal resources. It came with an official warning. If she continued her attempts to force me into the HOA or interfere with my property, we'd seek injunctive relief. 2 days after she received it, her car drove slowly past my house. I watched her through the blinds. She didn't get out, just sat there in her silver Lexus, sunglasses on, hands on the wheel like she was deciding whether to honk or mow down my mailbox. I stared back. She finally drove off. But the next morning, my mailbox was hanging open again. And stuffed inside was a freshly printed letter, thicker than ever. Different envelope this time, pseudo-legal letterhead, bold serif font, but the name was the same. Notice of intent to initiate property standardization review. She was escalating again, and now she was getting smarter. It was a Sunday morning when everything tipped over. I had just come back from the grocery store, bags still in the trunk when I saw them. 2 police cruisers parked diagonally across my driveway. Their lights were off, but both officers were out, standing stiff in the gravel with hands on their belts. And between them stood Karen Hale, arms crossed, that same smug expression she always wore like perfume. I felt the cold in my gut before I even stepped out of the car. One of the officers, tall white guy, maybe mid-30s, took a step forward. "Are you Nathan Carter?" I nodded. "Yeah. What's going on?" He glanced at his partner, then back at me. "We've received a report from the Hillcrest Rancho Homeowners Association claiming that you are unlawfully residing on this property, that the home and land were transferred to HOA authority under a vote by the general membership." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. Transferred to who? Karen stepped forward before I could finish. She had a folder clutched in both hands like it contained nuclear codes. "Officer, this is the file I mentioned. You'll find the notarized record of community reassignment, the vote tally, and the declaration of abandonment filed under Resolution 22B. I blinked. "Abandonment? What the hell are you talking about?" Karen didn't even look at me. "Your father, the previous owner, failed to register the property in compliance with the district integration plan when it was implemented. Therefore, under our charter, the land reverted to the association's control." The officer looked uncomfortable. "Sir, do you have any documentation proving current ownership?" "Yeah," I said, already pulling out my phone. "Give me 30 seconds. I opened my encrypted cloud folder and handed it to him. Original deed, title transfer, exclusion clause from the HOA charter, all neatly organized. I watched his eyes track across the screen. "Give me a moment," he muttered, walking back toward his cruiser. Karen tried to follow, but the second officer gently blocked her path. She turned back to me, lips twitching. "You think this little bluff is going to work? Our documents are legally binding. I have the vote, the charter amendment, everything. Your property is part of this community now. You can either comply or leave." I stepped back, pulled out my own folder from the passenger seat, the one James gave me after the cease and desist, and flipped it open to the summary page. "This property is not, has never been, and cannot legally be absorbed into Hillcrest Rancho HOA. I said, loud enough for both cops to hear. "Any vote or amendment has no jurisdiction over this land." Karen's smile didn't crack. "You're in denial. You think some dusty clause from the 90s protects you from progress? You're not special, Nate. You're just obsolete." I stared at her, calm on the outside, but gripping the edge of the folder hard enough to cramp my fingers. That's when the first officer returned. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "we're going to need to verify the signatures on your documents. They're not notarized, and one of the witnesses listed is deceased." Her expression changed, just a flicker, but I caught it. "Those are technicalities," she said, voice clipped. "The board voted. The neighborhood agrees. This isn't personal, it's protocol." The second officer took my phone, still displaying my files, and whispered something to his partner. They stepped aside to talk. Karen kept staring at me, eyes burning. "You really want to do this the hard way?" she said under her breath. "I can bury you in paperwork. I can have code enforcement here every day. I'll get you blackballed from the community entirely." I smiled. "I'm not in your damn community." 10 minutes later, a sergeant arrived, older, composed, with that tired, I've heard it all demeanor. The officers brought him up to speed, while Karen hovered like a shark circling a leaky boat. He reviewed the documents from both sides, asked me a few direct questions, then turned to Karen. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come down to the station. Some of these filings appear to be fraudulent." Her voice went cold. "That's a mistake. You don't know who you're talking to." "Then you won't mind clearing it up with our legal unit." She didn't resist, but as they led her toward her Lexus, she turned her head and hissed just loud enough for me to hear. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." The next few hours felt like walking across a frozen lake, unsure when the ice would finally crack. After the police escorted Karen away, they didn't arrest her, not yet, just took her in for questioning. They were careful with their language, no handcuffs, no raised voices, but I could tell something had shifted. This wasn't a warning shot anymore. This was the beginning of actual consequences. The sergeant stayed behind to talk. He was calm, measured, the kind of guy who's seen more than enough HOA drama to know it rarely ends with just an awkward neighborhood potluck. "I'm not saying she'll be charged," he said, flipping through her printouts, "but some of these documents, they're a mess. No notary, no record of being filed with the county. And this signature," He pointed to a name I recognized, Harold Lorne, the original HOA chairman, deceased since 2017. Yeah, I said. She forged a dead man's name. Looks that way. He nodded. We'll be sending these over to the county attorney. When they finally left, I went back inside and sat on the couch, staring at the ceiling fan like it might suddenly drop some kind of divine explanation for how all this had escalated so fast. I'd never even spoken to this woman until a few weeks ago, and now she was waving fake documents at cops on my lawn. Later that afternoon, I got a call from James. "She's not backing down," he said without preamble. "I just got word from the city clerk's office. Someone submitted a Freedom of Information request under your name, trying to pull every permit you've ever filed." "Let me guess," I said. "Karen." She used a different name, but the IP address traced back to the HOA office. It's the digital equivalent of rattling a saber. I let out a breath and rubbed my eyes. She told me I made the biggest mistake of my life. James was quiet for a beat. She's bluffing. But don't let your guard down. If she's desperate enough to forge property documents, she might have more tricks up her sleeve. He was right. That night, my neighbor across the street, old Mr. Elkins, who usually kept to himself, knocked on my door with a puzzled look. "You know anything about this?" he asked, holding up a flyer. At the top, in bold black text, it read, "Community Alert, Unregistered Resident Occupying Lot 14. Below was a blurred Google Maps image of my property and a long paragraph about non-compliance with community values. "She put this in my mailbox," he said, shaking his head. "I don't even know what a rogue property agent is, but apparently you're it." I took the flyer, scanned it, and added it to the growing log I'd been keeping. Karen wasn't just trying to pressure me, she was turning the neighbors against me. The following morning, 2 more people knocked. One woman looked uncomfortable, clutching her own flyer. She apologized. I didn't know it was fake. I thought, I don't know. She said there were legal issues. I told her not to worry, showed her the deed, gave her a short version of the facts. She left embarrassed, but grateful. It was working. Karen's lies were starting to unravel, but she was moving faster, like someone trying to finish a heist before the cops showed up. That same day, my doorbell rang again. But this time, it wasn't a neighbor. It was a man in a suit, mid-50s with a briefcase and a badge on his belt. "Mr. Carter, I'm with the County Legal Counsel's office. I've been assigned to review some documents recently brought forward regarding your property. Mind if I come in?" I let him in. He was professional, methodical. Asked if I had time to go over the history of interactions with Hillcrest Rancho HOA. I opened my laptop, pulled up the spreadsheet, the screenshots, the video, the notarized letters. I laid it all out. After 20 minutes, he leaned back and said, "I've seen some aggressive HOAs before, but this is organized and illegal." He didn't say much more, just that they'd be in touch, and that the county might be pursuing its own investigation, independent of police. By the time he left, I wasn't scared. I was ready. 3 days passed without incident. No letters, no trash, no surprise compliance reviews taped to my gate. The quiet almost felt suspicious, like the moment just before a mine goes off under your feet. I kept checking my cameras, double-checking locks, expecting something. But nothing came, until it did. I was in the backyard working on a motion-triggered light system when my phone buzzed. A new voicemail. Unknown number. I hit play and listened to Karen's voice, low and almost amused. "You think you've won something, Nate? You really don't get it. You don't beat people like me with paperwork. I'll outlast you. You'll make a mistake. And when you do, I'll be there with a notary and a police report." Click. It wasn't yelling. It wasn't a direct threat, but it was Karen breaking character, cracking under pressure. She'd lost the illusion of control and was now trying fear instead. I forwarded the voicemail to James, who replied with a 2-word email. Documented. Noted. Later that afternoon, I got a knock on the door. Another officer, not Chang this time. Someone new. Younger. He looked uncomfortable holding a large envelope. "Mr. Carter," he said, "this is for you. It's from the HOA. Officially, it's a complaint packet submitted through a third-party process server. I took the envelope and opened it on the porch. Inside, dozens of pages listing infractions, all fake. Improper structure visibility, unregulated fencing, failure to comply with light pollution standards. One even cited emotional disruption to community cohesion. There was even a vote record, allegedly showing that 90% of active HOA members had agreed to reclassify my property. I looked up at the officer. "You realize none of this is binding, right?" He nodded, a little embarrassed. "We have to deliver it, that's all." Fine. But the worst part wasn't the paperwork. It was the conversation I had that night. One of my neighbors, Rachel, a young mom with 2 kids, came to see me. She looked shaken. "She came to my door," Rachel said. "Karen, yesterday." She said if I didn't sign a petition to reclaim community resources, she'd report me for non-conforming paint colors. My kids' bikes are blue. That's what she pointed at. I stared at her, stunned. "She's threatening people now?" I asked. Rachel nodded. She even brought up code violations from before I bought the house. Said she'd dig them up if I didn't cooperate. I told her to give me a written statement, if she was comfortable. She agreed. Next morning, I sent the recording of Karen's voicemail and Rachel's statement to James and to the county attorney's office. James replied immediately. "They're filing for a preliminary injunction. If she so much as steps on your property again, it'll be a criminal offense." I printed out a copy of the motion and taped it inside my window, facing out. The next day, Karen drove by again. This time, she stopped. She got out of her car, walked up to the sidewalk, didn't step onto my lawn, and just stared at the house for a full 30 seconds. Then, with her arms crossed, she shouted loud enough for the whole street, "You think this is over? I haven't even started." I didn't see Karen for 2 days after her sidewalk meltdown, but that didn't mean she was gone. Like mold, she preferred to work in the dark. Late Tuesday evening, I got a call from James. "She's filed something new," he said. "She's trying to request a lien." I sat up straighter. "A lion? On my house?" "Correct, under false pretense of HOA dues owed for noncompliance. It's completely fraudulent, but it's been entered into the county system. I've already moved to block it, but it'll take a few days to get the freeze order." I clenched the phone. "How is this even possible?" James sighed. "Because county clerks aren't detectives. They don't verify legitimacy unless someone disputes it, which we're doing now." I thanked him and hung up. Then I went outside and circled my house like a man expecting an ambush. It felt like I was being stalked by a bureaucracy with fangs, and Karen was holding the leash. The next morning, I drove to the county recorder's office myself, printed copies of everything Karen had filed under my parcel number, and hand-delivered a complaint to the fraud division. While I was filling out paperwork, the clerk at the front desk, a guy in his 50s with reading glasses and the patience of a saint, looked at the documents and muttered, "Hillcrest Rancho again." Apparently, I wasn't the first. Back home, I checked my cameras again. And finally, I got her. At 3:12 a.m. that night, a motion alert pinged my phone. I opened the feed. Karen, in a hoodie, walking up to my mailbox. She pulled something from her coat, a new letter, and slid it inside. Then she paused, turned to the camera, and smiled directly into the lens. I froze the frame, screenshotted it, and emailed it to James with one line, "Your move." The letter was another fake notice of community reassessment. It included a breakdown of fines now allegedly owed, over $7,000. $7,000. The next morning, I drove straight to the police station and handed over the footage, the letter, the history. This time, I didn't get a polite nod. I got a detective assigned, Detective Alvarez, sharp suit, sharp mind. She listened to everything, took notes, asked questions. When I showed her the camera footage, she said only one word, unbelievable. She promised to open an investigation into criminal misrepresentation, mail fraud, and document forgery. And that's when things started turning. Neighbors began approaching me, quietly, cautiously. I got the same letter. She tried to fine me for a bench swing. She threatened to revoke my garage access. One by one, they started talking, sharing screenshots, emails, copies of letters almost identical to mine, but with different made-up violations, different invented clauses. I created a shared folder online and told everyone to drop in their evidence. By the end of the week, I had submissions from 11 Nordauser households. Karen wasn't running a homeowners association. She was running a shakedown. Detective Alvarez moved fast. Within 2 days, she had already pulled subpoenaed records from Hillcrest Rancho's internal servers, or what passed for servers. It turned out most of the HOA's operations ran from Karen's personal laptop and a single shared Google Drive. According to Alvarez, it was chaos. No board meeting minutes, no accounting logs, Just a string of half-formatted PDFs, template violation notices, and an Excel sheet titled Reclamation Targets. That one stopped her cold. Karen had actually been tracking properties not part of the HOA, with notes beside each: high-value lot, non-compliant fence, no active resistance. My name was highlighted in red. Alvarez called me in for a formal statement. We went over everything, from the fake violation letters to the phony community votes to the midnight mailbox stunt. She didn't say it outright, but I could tell charges were coming. Still, Karen wasn't finished. On Friday morning, someone rang my doorbell. I checked the camera feed before opening. It was a man in a gray blazer holding a clipboard. Not a cop, not a neighbor. A process server. He handed me a sealed envelope and walked away. Inside, a cease and desist letter from Karen Hale personally, not from the HOA, from her. She accused me of harassment, defamation, and coordinating a smear campaign to undermine community harmony. I stared at it, stunned. This woman had forged documents, stalked my property, filed a lien against my home, and now she was claiming I was the aggressor. I sent it to James. His reply came 10 minutes later. Desperation move. Ignore it. We'll address it in court. That evening, I got another call, this time from Alvarez. We executed a search warrant on the HOA office today. She didn't even wait for me to respond. We found stacks of fabricated notices, empty envelopes pre-labeled with various addresses, and a file marked Active Conversion Program. She had drafted letters threatening to revoke access to community parks, driveways, and utilities for people who didn't pay invented fees. I sat in silence. She's done, Alvarez added. She doesn't know it yet, but she's done. Still, Karen made one last move. That night, around 11, I heard a loud knock on my door. I opened it to find her, not in disguise, not smiling. Karen, in her Sunday best blouse, heels digging into my welcome mat like she owned it. You think you're clever, she hissed. You've made this ugly. You turned neighbors against me. This was supposed to be order, clean, civilized. I didn't answer. Just let the camera above the door record every word. Her voice dropped. They're going to come for me, but I swear to God, I'll take you with me. I have things, Nate. Emails, mistakes you've made. You want a war? I can make one. I didn't flinch. I just reached out, gently shut the door in her face, and locked it. 10 minutes later, I emailed the video to Alvarez. Karen didn't know the video she left me with was the final nail in her coffin. Detective Alvarez did. The morning after Karen's doorstep meltdown, Alvarez called to tell me the county prosecutor had seen enough. Between the surveillance footage, the forged documents, the neighbor testimonies, and now Karen's recorded threat, they had everything they needed. By the time I finished my coffee, a warrant was already signed. I didn't see the arrest happen, but I heard about it from Mr. Elkins, who witnessed it from his porch like it was a 4th of July parade. She screamed something about property sovereignty and tried to slam the door, he told me. Didn't work. They walked her out in cuffs. No wiggle room this time. Later that day, Alvarez called again. We raided her office. Got everything. Everything? Hard drives, letter templates, HOA meeting records, including one she forged with a fake witness and a dead person's signature. She even had a template for retroactive community decisions, completely fabricated. Oh, and guess what we found in her trunk? What? 10 pre-filled lien packets with random names. Yours was still in there. She planned to keep going. It wasn't just me she targeted. More neighbors came forward in the following days. Some had already paid her fees out of fear. Others admitted to signing HOA petitions they didn't understand, pressured by veiled threats. One elderly woman had been told her landscaping could lead to legal eviction. James coordinated with Alvarez and the DA to ensure everyone was represented as victims in the case. Fraud, harassment, impersonation of municipal authority, attempted unlawful seizure of property. The list grew by the hour. Karen's bail was denied. Too many risks, too many lies. The county assigned a forensic auditor to review HOA finances. What they found made my skin crawl. Over 2 years, Karen had funneled nearly $900,000 through administrative penalties, compliance donations, and fake fines. Not 1 cent reported to the IRS. No accounting. Just spreadsheets and a personal PayPal account linked to a shell LLC she called Community Enhancement Group. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. The trial was scheduled quickly, thanks to overwhelming evidence. James sent me copies of the charges, over a dozen counts, including felony-level real estate fraud and obstruction of justice. In a rare move, the prosecutor offered a plea deal only if she admitted guilt on all primary charges and named any accomplices. She refused. She really thought she could still win. So we went to court. Court was brutal. But not for me. For Karen, it was a slow public unwinding. She arrived every day in a dull gray blazer, hair pulled back, that fake HOA smile finally gone. She barely looked at anyone in the courtroom. Not the prosecutor, not the judge, definitely not me. Maybe she thought ignoring us made her seem composed. It didn't. It made her look like a roach trying to pretend the lights weren't on. The trial lasted 5 days. The prosecution opened with a digital presentation, a side-by-side comparison of Karen's fake documents and the county's official records. The discrepancies were obvious. Signatures didn't match. Dates were inconsistent. One notary seal was just a clip art image with the word official misspelled. Then came the witness testimonies. Rachel told the jury how Karen threatened her over the color of her kids' bikes. Mr. Elkins described the day Karen informed him his garage was technically HOA property. A retired veteran nearly broke down explaining how he paid over $3,000 in invented residential integration fees to avoid trouble. Finally, they brought me up. I told the story from the beginning. The letters, the threats, the fake violations, the lien attempt. I showed them the video of Karen yelling on my porch, the footage of her sneaking up to my mailbox at 3 a.m., the spreadsheet of 11 other victims. Karen's attorney tried to paint it all as procedural confusion. But when the county auditor took the stand and detailed the $900,000 in diverted funds, complete with a trail to Karen's personal accounts, the jury didn't need convincing. Deliberations took less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge was clear. Ms. Hale, you not only violated the trust of your neighbors, you weaponized bureaucracy, falsified government documents, and attempted to seize private property through fraud. You abused every inch of power available to you, and then some. Sentence: 10 years in state prison. No parole for the first of Voran. The courtroom was quiet as they led her away. She didn't scream, didn't cry. Just walked, stiff and silent, like she was still in charge of something. She wasn't. After the sentencing, the HOA was placed under external administration. A court-appointed auditor reviewed every policy, every fee, every action taken by Karen over the last 2 years. Dozens of fines were reversed. Every lien she attempted was nullified. Residents who paid were reimbursed from the HOA's frozen account. Then came the big one. In a rare community action, more than $46 40 homes filed formal paperwork to exit the HOA entirely. The district court allowed it. For the first time in 2 decades, Hillcrest Rancho began to dissolve. I never asked to be a leader in any of it, but that didn't stop the local paper from running a story with my photo. Engineer exposes HOA tyranny, turns fraud into freedom. It made the rounds. A few local blogs picked it up. Someone mailed me a t-shirt that said, "Not in your HOA, Karen." Rachel brought over brownies. Mr. Elkins raised a beer in my honor across the street. A few neighbors, ones who once avoided eye contact, came by to thank me. Some apologized. I didn't hold grudges. Not after everything. Before all this, I'd just been a guy fixing wires and enjoying the peace. Now, I still am. Only now there's a metal sign on my gate. Black letters on brushed steel. Private property. HO not recognized. Legal counsel on speed dial.